Hello everyone, my name is Bibi.
Good afternoon, class. My name is Joseph.
Hello, my name is Serena.
Hello everyone, my name is Camron Lockett.
Hello everyone, my name is Ben Flores.
Hello everyone, my name is Bibi and I'm doing the pro-opening statement for digital surveillance. With increasing number of different crimes and complex threats, is it still a question of whether we can afford digital surveillance or can we truly afford to live without it? And I know that our opponents may argue that digital surveillance can invade privacy or control people. However, we believe that when digital surveillance is implemented responsibly with clear policies, it can create a safer world by creating a digital shield that protects citizens rather than controlling them or invading their privacy. Digital surveillance provides advantages for both businesses and public, leading to reduced crime, increased efficiency, and a safer environment for everyone. The first point I want to discuss is how it reduces crimes. It can reduce crime by deterring potential offenders, and the presence of visible cameras increases the risk of getting caught, which can discourage criminal activity. The footage can also be used as evidence in court, which helps to identify the perpetrators. And according to the article, "Do surveillance cameras deter crime?" found in the www.adt.com website. And studies showed a 50% drop in all crime types after the installation of security cameras. Visible surveillance cameras can increase overall safety and security for communities and businesses, which can also help build public trust in law enforcement. In addition to reducing crime, it can also help increase efficiency in businesses by automating tasks and monitoring performance and ensuring accountability. Digital surveillance tools help to identify activities that is wasting time and help to improve time management. Furthermore, automating tasks can minimize errors and reduce manual efforts. Monitoring performance of employees provides valuable data on their performance, which can be improved through effective training and coaching. And according to the article, does employee monitoring increase productivity? Expectation versus reality, found in the website employee.com. And studies show that digital surveillance that's not overly strict can improve employee productivity by 22%. And although digital surveillance can have a negative impact on employees, if it is used properly and not overly strict, it can greatly improve productivity and efficiency. And finally, when digital surveillance is used responsibly and properly, it can create a safe environment for everyone, and it can also help with preventing crimes and find the criminals with the evidence found using digital surveillance. And it can also increase efficiency and productivity in businesses.
Hey, BB, I just want to clarify some things. You mentioned in your opening statement digital surveillance should be used responsibly. Can you explain to me exactly what responsibility means in this context? Who decides what responsibility looks like? Is it the government? Is it companies? Is it citizens? Is there any examples we could go off of based on if surveillance has stayed completely responsible or been abused or misused? Where are we gauging responsibility is my question. In your next section, you said cameras reduce crime by 50%. Do the studies include what type of crimes? Are they major offenses, minor offenses, petty theft? Reduces crime by 50%. What type of crime is that? Okay, let me see. And in your second argument, you said right here, you mentioned that surveillance improves productivity. Does this measure employee stress or just overall job satisfaction? If employees know they're being watched, could that make them feel less trusted or anxious? You said isn't overly strict, but who gets to decide what overly strict means? It's just kind of vague. And if surveillance data is stored in a work environment, then how do the employees know it won't be misused or necessarily shared? Let's see. In your next section, let me see. You said surveillance creates a digital shield, but doesn't that shield also record innocent people who have done nothing? Let's see. If someone's personal information is collected without their consent, it's not ethical at all. And do you think people do you think people act naturally when they know that they're being watched? Let's see. Okay, and I just have some questions. We'll wrap it up right now. So I just want to ask you, if surveillance is misused or is hacked, isn't that a risk to public safety? That's it.
Hey Joseph, I just want to ask some questions regarding your opening statement. So, in your first point, you stated that everything we do can be logged. However, is it not true that we voluntarily make choices every day to trade some degree of personal data for convenience, such as GPS and other personalized online services? And you also mentioned the 2019 research study of Americans feeling a lack of control over their data. Do you know if this study differentiate between government surveillance, public safety, and corporate data collection for marketing analysis? And is the public's concern mainly about government or corporate profiting from their personal data? And if the alternative to digital surveillance is a less safe society, where do you draw the line? In your next point, you mentioned the potential of digital surveillance being abused. Does this mean that firearms or advanced medical equipment should also not be used because of it being potentially abused? And you also brought up the monitoring of peaceful protesters. And what is your proposed alternative for law enforcement to identify and de-escalate potential threats at large public gatherings? And lastly, in your third argument, you suggested that investing in smarter, targeted law enforcement and strong community-based approaches is more effective. How do you propose modern, targeted law enforcement that operates without accessing any digital information, that's targeted, not imply using data to identify specific individuals or groups?
Good afternoon, class. My name is Joseph, and I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to present the con side of our important debate on digital surveillance. This will be our opening statement. We stand firm against the idea that digital surveillance is a necessary tool for modern society. While we can recognize that technology can be used for public safety, we believe that widespread intelligence is a dangerous overreach that threatens our privacy, threatens our civil liberties, and threatens democracy itself. For this debate, our argument is grounded in 3 main points. First point, digital surveillance erodes privacy, creating a society where individuals are constantly monitored without consent. Our second point will be these systems are highly vulnerable to abuse by both governments and corporations, often targeting marginalized communities and political dissent. Our last point will be despite the promise of increased safety, digital surveillance offers a false sense of security and is often ineffective at preventing crime or terrorism. Although surveillance may appear to offer protection, the long-term consequences living under constant watch are too great at the cost. We urge society that values rights over control. Our first argument, the erosion of privacy. In a surveillance-heavy society, every single thing we do, from websites we visit to our physical movements through GPS, are being tracked. They can be logged, stored, and analyzed. This data can be collected without us even knowing or having any type of meaningful consent. For example, facial recognition cameras are now being used in public spaces, sometimes without any public discussion or regulation. This kind of technology blurs the lines between safety and intrusion. What we lose is the ability to move through the world anonymously, a fundamental aspect of our personal freedom. According to a 2019 Pew Research study, over 60% of Americans feel as if they have no control over how their data is being collected. That sense of helplessness is not a sign of a healthy or just society. Our second argument, the potential for abuse. Even if surveillance tools are created with good intention, history shows that they are easily misused. Governments have targeted journalists, they have targeted political opponents, and have targeted minority groups using surveillance tools under the guise of national security. One alarming example is the use of Pegasus spyware, which has been used to hack phones of journalists and activists around the world. In the US, peaceful protests during Black Lives Matter movements were being monitored by federal agencies, not because they were criminals, but because they were politically inconvenient. This is not just about foreign dictatorships, this is happening in our democracy. When we normalize surveillance, we normalize the idea that power should operate without any transparency, that power should operate without any accountability. Lastly, our last argument is that it provides a false sense of security. Our final point, excuse me. Advocates claim that collecting massive amounts of data keeps us safer, but more data does not mean better outcomes. Often, law enforcement and intelligence agencies are overwhelmed with irrelevant data and miss real threats, not because of lack of information, but because of poor analysis and communication. The 9/11 Commission report itself noted that the failure to prevent the attack was not due to insufficient surveillance, but to agencies not acting on intelligence they had already had. Investing in a smarter, targeted law enforcement and strong community-based approach is far more effective than just watching everyone at all times.
Hello, my name is Serena, and I'll be responding to the cons side arguments regarding digital surveillance and data protection. The opposition raised some concerns about privacy, misuse, and effectiveness. While these concerns are understandable, their argument overlooks one key fact: that responsible digital surveillance is designed to protect people from these very risks. When managed correctly, it strengthens public safety, accountability, and justice without crossing personal boundaries. The con side focuses heavily on fear, like the fear of being watched, tracked, or losing control of our own privacy. But that fear doesn't reflect how well regulated and limited most modern surveillance systems actually are. Starting with their first claim about the erosion of privacy, they argue that surveillance destroys the ability to live freely or anonymously, but in reality, our privacy today isn't being threatened by public cameras or city monitoring. It's being threatened by hackers, online scammers, and identity thieves that surveillance actually helps prevent. If you want to protect privacy in a world revolving around technology, there needs to be systems in place that can detect and stop cyber threats before they reach you. It's also important to remember the surveillance systems in the US are bound by laws that protect people's privacy. For example, the Privacy Act of 1947 restricts how federal agencies can collect and share personal data, requiring them to notify people when their information is gathered and why. On top of that, state-level laws like the California Consumer Privacy Act give people the right to know what data is collected and how their information is being used. In the first year, the California Attorney General reported that 75% of businesses updated their privacy practices to comply with this law. These kind of protections make sure that surveillance can be used responsibly without overstepping boundaries. Most surveillance systems, such as public security cameras, are placed in areas where safety is already a concern, like airports, train stations, or high-crime neighborhoods. They aren't designed to track certain individuals, or most footage isn't even reviewed unless a crime or a serious event occurs. Rejecting surveillance entirely out of fear would actually make people more vulnerable, not more free. Now, addressing their point about potential abuse, the Kansai mentioned examples like Pegasus soft spyware and the misuse of surveillance against activists. While those cases are real, they're rare and illegal, not examples of normal surveillance. We shouldn't throw away an entire system of protection because of rare instances of abuse. We should focus on strengthening it. In fact, many police departments now have independent review boards and auditing systems that monitor how surveillance data is used. One example is the use of body-worn cameras, which are a form of digital surveillance. According to the U.S. Office of Justice Programs, officers with body cameras experienced 37% fewer use of force incidents and nearly 60% fewer civilian complaints. That means surveillance can hold people accountable and build trust, not just between law enforcement and communities, but across society as a whole. The con side assumes that surveillance automatically equals oppression, but when done right, it's the opposite. It protects people from oppression by recording the truth, ensuring accountability, and deterring corruption or abuse. Finally, addressing their point that surveillance offers a false sense of security, they argue that collecting too much data overwhelms law enforcement and doesn't really prevent crime. But the evidence shows otherwise. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, targeted surveillance and data analysis have improved response times, helped locate suspects faster, and supported investigations that rely heavily on verifiable evidence rather than assumption. This shows that digital surveillance isn't about control, it's about prevention and protection. When used responsibly, it keeps our community safer without taking away the rights we value. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Ben Flores, and I will be presenting the rebuttal for the proposition that digital surveillance creates a safer and more efficient world. While our opponents paint a picture of security and progress, we must remember that safety cannot come at the cost of freedom or trust. Digital surveillance, even when labeled as responsible, opens the door to serious risks, including privacy invasion, data misuse, and the erosion of individual rights. Let's take a deeper look at the claims made by the affirmative side and see why they don't hold up under real-world conditions. First, crime reduction. Our opponents argue that the digital surveillance will reduce crime by deterring potential offenders. While that sounds reasonable in theory, studies show that the effect is temporary and limited. Yes, cameras may reduce petty crimes in the areas they cover, but they often just push the crime somewhere else. This concept is known as crime displacement. For example, a 2019 meta-analysis from the Urban Institute found that while visible cameras lowered thefts in parking lots, they had little to no effect on violent crimes, cybercrimes, or organized offenses. Even more concerning, the deterrent idea becomes an assumption that criminals act rationally, but in reality, most crimes happen impulsively or under stress, meaning cameras don't stop them. And while footage can help in investigations, it's reactive and not preventive. It doesn't stop harm, it simply records it. Finally, surveillance doesn't always build trust in law enforcement. Sometimes it does the opposite. When citizens feel constantly watched, it breeds suspicion, not safety. Communities begin to feel like suspects and not partners. So while digital surveillance might look like it prevents crime, in practice it just shifts the problem, records it, and often creates new ones like mistrust or fear. Second, we're going to talk about efficiency in business. Our opponents claim that surveillance increases efficiency and accountability in the workplace. But let's be honest, what's called efficiently can sometimes be micromanagement or an invasion of privacy. Research from the Harvard Business Review shows that the constant digital monitoring of employees causes stress, burnout, and turnover, especially when employees feel like they're being watched every second. When people know they're under constant supervision, creativity and morale drop. That 22% increase in productivity that our opponents mentioned, it might last a few months, but then long-term exhaustion and resentment can set in, leading to lower retention and overall performance. Surveillance also creates a power imbalance. Managers get to watch, analyze, and judge workers, but employees have no control or say in how their data is used. This kind of one-sided power dynamic can lead to unfair evaluations, biased data interpretation, and even discrimination in hiring or promotions. And responsible use sounds nice in theory, but there are countless examples of companies misusing employee data, selling it to third parties, or even using it to suppress unions. Once surveillance becomes normalized, it rarely stays responsible. So yes, digital surveillance can boost efficiency, but only at the cost of human dignity and trust in the workplace. Next, we're going to talk about the myth of responsible use. The affirmative side repeats the phrase when used responsibly, but here's the problem. What defines responsible? There are a few universal laws determining how surveillance data is collected, stored, or even shared. Governments and corporations often promise ethical guidelines, yet data leaks, facial recognition leaks, and unauthorized access keeps happening. For example, major data breaches like the 2023 Clearview AI scandal showed how facial recognition images of millions of people were taken without consent and shared with law enforcement and other private companies. These weren't criminals, they were ordinary citizens. So trusting surveillance to stay ethical is like trusting a locked door in a house that keeps building more keys. Eventually someone's going to use it the wrong way. So to sum it up, digital surveillance doesn't truly prevent crime, it just records it. And it doesn't build trust in workplaces, it undermines it. And the phrase use responsibility.
Hello everyone, it's Serena again, and I'll be wrapping up the key points from the pro side of the debate on digital surveillance and data protection. During this debate, we've heard a lot of good points made by the con side, but what I really want to emphasize in this video is how necessary digital surveillance is, not just today, but for the future of our society. Right now, society is on a path where technology is becoming more integrated into every part of our lives. Cities are getting smarter, workplaces are more connected, and information moves faster than ever before. Digital surveillance is an important part of this transformation, helping systems work more efficiently, keeping communities safe, and ensuring accountability as technology evolves. Without it, we risk falling behind in a world that relies increasingly on real-time information and data-driven decisions. If you imagine a city without cameras, no monitoring systems, and no checks and power, the result would be higher crime rates, unsolved cases, and authority figures operating without accountability. That's the reality we could face without digital surveillance. Surveillance is not about controlling people, it's about protecting communities and keeping society functioning safely and fairly. As I've mentioned before, the con focuses a lot of their argument on fear and warns us about the many potential risks of surveillance. But if we put it into perspective, fear alone does not outweigh the evidence and results. There are far greater dangers that could come about if nothing was ever monitored or recorded. The con side claims cameras and monitoring does prevent crimes and only creates a false sense of security. However, digital surveillance is extremely important when it comes to safety and emergency response. It allows communities to respond to a situation or emergency faster while being prepared. For example, monitoring public spaces allows authorities to detect accidents, fights, or emergencies early on and respond before a situation escalates. It's been shown that areas with visible surveillance have half the crime rate, and cities like London and New York report that high crime neighborhoods have become a lot safer since installing monitoring systems. The cons mentioned crime displacement in their argument, and it is true that crime could go elsewhere when there's no surveillance. However, this proves that surveillance really does stop criminals from committing crimes and reduces the overall risk. Footage from cameras is also an essential part for solving serious crimes. Without video evidence, many criminals would go unpunished, leaving communities more vulnerable. Now, to discuss workplaces and how digital surveillance affects efficiency, the con side suggests that monitoring only stresses employees and makes them unhappy. But when done the right way, digital surveillance actually supports employees and managers. It helps by identifying areas in daily operations that need improvement, like that will help reduce mistakes and make day-to-day tasks run more smoothly. Big companies like Google and Amazon use these systems to organize workflow, prevent errors, and provide support, not to micromanage or control employees. In this way, surveillance in the workplace should be considered a tool to help people succeed, rather than something that monitors an employee's every move. Now, to discuss trust and accountability. The con side argument leads you to believe that surveillance is too invasive and too risky to be justified. But if we're being honest, would we really want to give people free rein, hoping they would never make a mistake or abuse their power? Surveillance creates a system where actions can be reviewed, mistakes can be corrected, and wrongdoing can be addressed. Without it, accountability disappears, and the people who are supposed to protect us could act without any consequences. To oppose digital surveillance would be to choose freedom without safety, which may sound appealing in theory, but can be dangerous in reality. The main clash in this debate comes down to fear versus protection. The con side focuses on what could go wrong, but we have shown what actually works in the real world. Digital surveillance deters crime, improves safety, and helps workplaces run efficiently. Cities and organizations that use it responsibly see safer streets, more crimes solved, and better outcomes. In the end, digital surveillance is just a tool, and its impact depends on how we use it. When used responsibly, it helps people feel more safe, supports community, and ensures those in power are held accountable. That's why we firmly believe society cannot afford to give up surveillance systems. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Camron Lockett. Today I'll be doing the crystallization for the con side. As we close this debate, I would like to get back to the heart of the matter: our rights, safety, and our freedom. The pro side argues that digital surveillance can reduce crime, improve efficiency in businesses, and create a safer environment for the public, but as long as it's used responsibly. We have an idea of the perfect version of digital surveillance, but what we're debating is more focused on the application of this in the real world and the negatives that may come along with digital surveillance. I'll crystallize this round into three main reasons why I believe our side should win this debate. For our first argument, it's privacy and freedom. The biggest thing digital surveillance invades and takes away is our privacy. The pro side makes a point that it protects us from criminals and hackers, but our main focus is what about when the government or companies collect everything we do and track everywhere we go? That is control, not safety. Once this information is collected, we have no say in what really stays private. We also gave examples of real-world situations, such as how governments use surveillance on activists in the past. The pro side said this was rare, but these things are already happening in democratic countries, so we can't just ignore this problem. Also, according to Pew Research, 60% of people feel they have lost their control over their personal data. This is not okay. A society that is constantly watched and surveilled isn't truly a free country. For our second main argument, it regards prevention and control, or prevention versus control. The pro side argues that digital surveillance stops crimes and makes workers more efficient, but does it really? We pointed out that digital surveillance doesn't truly stop crimes. Instead, it pushes crime elsewhere, which you mentioned and is called displacement. Another point we made is that crime happens impulsively or under stress, meaning it's not likely someone will think to themselves, oh no, a camera in the heat of a moment when they're committing a crime. So even though cameras may be recording everything, that still won't stop the crimes from happening in the first place. We can also apply this thought process to the workplace. Surveillance may work in the short term, by boosting efficiency, but in the long run, it may be doing more harm due to the stress it may cause for the employees. The constant surveillance in the workplace can potentially lead to burnout and even people quitting. Constant surveillance doesn't lead to true efficiency. It's just people not trying to get in trouble. This is something that may look good on paper, but in reality, the negatives outweigh the positives. For our third main argument, it regards what does use responsibly truly mean. The pro side mentions use responsibly time and time again, but who decides what this truly means? There's no clear definition on what responsible means regarding this topic. So what may be responsible to one company may be completely unethical to another person. Once a system like this is in place, the rules start to bend, shift over time, and eventually turn to something completely different than what was originally intended. We brought up the Clearview AI scandal, where people's faces were used without their permission. That wasn't something that was far off. It actually happened here in the U.S. On the grounds of this, trusting that digital surveillance will always stay ethical is a lot easier said than done. Systems like this will inevitably push boundaries, and not everyone will always use them responsibly. So for our final thoughts, we're not saying that surveillance has zero benefits, but the question here is whether those benefits are worth the trade-offs, and we don't think they are. The stuff Pro is talking about only works if everything goes perfectly, in the perfect society. But the dangers we brought up, they're already happening, and they just don't go away because someone says we'll be responsible. And we truly believe for one of our a main point of ours is that safety that costs us our freedom isn't true safety. We also believe efficiency based on fear and control is not true efficiency. Another thing we believe is giving up on a privacy to maybe stop a crime. That's not a fair trade at all to us. So in the end of all this, we were asking you to vote for the con side. We just don't think constant surveillance is the answer. A better society should be based on trust and not control. Thank you guys. You guys have a great day.